Hey Olive, Arlo, and Frank. Grandpa coming to you once again from the Big Easy, New Orleans, at the Airbnb, the Paradise Park. And today we're going to do another one from the Children's Book of Heroes by William J. Bennett. And today we're doing a prayer at Valley Forge. So this is a story about the Revolutionary War, when we left the British Empire and became our own nation. And it's about the man who would become the first president of the United States, General George Washington. He was the general in charge of the Continental Army, the 13 colonies. And it goes like this. This story about the Revolutionary War reminds us that in the worst of times, even great men need help. Often they look to God to find out. And Washington was one of those kind of guys. During the Revolutionary War, when Americans were fighting for their freedom, the British Army captured Philadelphia. Philadelphia is where your grandmother and I grew up. I'm from Kensington. I'm a Kenzo. She's from Overbrook, out, I guess you'd call it West Philly. They marched into town with flags flying and bands playing and made themselves at home for the winter. The fall of Philadelphia was a great blow to the Americans, for in those days it was the capital of the new nation. But George Washington's army was not strong enough to stop the British forces. Once the king's men were inside the city, the only thing the American general could do was see that they did not get into the countryside to do any mischief. So Washington led his men to Valley Forge, and Valley Forge is a national historical site to the northwest of Philly, and it's where they spent this brutal winter while the British troops were in Philly having the time of their life. So Washington led his men to Valley Forge, a place just a few miles from Philadelphia. There the American army could spend the winter. It could defend itself if attacked, and it could keep close watch on the British. And here is the picture from that page of General Washington going past and the men saluting him. It would have been easier to fight many battles than to spend that winter in Valley Forge. It was December, and there was no shelter of any kind. The soldiers bravely set work building huts for themselves. They made them out of whatever they could find, logs or fence rails, or just mud and straw. The snow drifted in at the windows, for they had no glass. The cold rain dripped through the roofs. The wind howled through every crack. There were few blankets, and many men slept shivering on the hard ground. Sometimes they sat up all night, crowding around the fires to keep from freezing. They did this the whole winter long. Their clothing was worse than the shelter. The whole army was in rags. Many of the men had no shirts. Even more were without shoes. Wherever they walked, the snow was marked with their blood. Some cut strips from their precious blankets and wound them around their feet to protect them from the freezing ground. Food was scanty. Sometimes for several days the soldiers went without meat. Sometimes they went even without bread. Around the camp, the groans of men who were sick and starving filled the air. Every evening when the sun sank, the officers wondered if the army could hold together one more day. And here's the soldiers all cold and trying to stay warm. One cold day, a Quaker farmer was walking along a creek at Valley Forge when he heard the murmur of a solemn voice. Creeping in its direction, he discovered a horse tied to a tree, but no rider. And here's the farmer coming up and the horse. Well, spoiler alert. You see on the other page who it was. The farmer stole nearer, following the sound of the voice. Through a thicket, he saw a lone man on his knees in the snow. It was General Washington. His cheeks were wet with tears as he prayed to the Almighty for help and guidance. And so here is the other part of the picture, because when you look, it's one picture, but it's on two separate pages, so you get the surprise of seeing who it is. The farmer quietly slipped away. When he reached home, he said to his wife, "Hannah, my dear, all is well. The Americans will win their independence, for George Washington will succeed. What makes thee think so?" So they're speaking in King James English. "What makes thee think so, Isaac?" she asked. And he was a Quaker, so that's why they have him speaking like that. Quakers were a religious sect of people that came to Pennsylvania. William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, was a Quaker, and he brought the Quakers with him. They had meetings instead of church services, and they kind of sat around and discussed the Bible and God and things like that. They were also peaceful people. They were very much set against war. And in most wars, if you're a Quaker, you'll be a conscientious objector. So you just won't be able to fight. They can take you into the army, but you'll get to do something that's not actually fighting against people and trying to kill them. Maybe they'll make you a medic and you can help people who are injured. "What makes thee think so, Isaac?" she asked. "I have heard him pray. I have heard him pray out in the woods, Hannah. Today, he said, if there is anyone on this, so he heard him pray today out in the woods, sorry. If there is anyone on this earth the Lord will listen to, it is this brave man. He will listen, Hannah. Rest assured he will." The farmer was right. When at last the harsh winter melted away and a soft green crept over the hillsides, George Washington's army still lived. And there were people that deserted, that just said, "No, I've had enough of this." We became as close as possible to having lost that war and then having the British just be tyrannical with us because they weren't real happy that we tried to get our independence. And there's no way that we should have won. So it probably was, to a great extent, prayers of people like General Washington that helped us get our independence and become the nation that we are today. We have our problems, but we are definitely the greatest place on earth to live. We have more freedoms than most people ever did. Against all odds, it had outlasted the cruel Valley Forge snows. With new hope, the Patriots marched away behind their brave commander to fight the British and win their freedom and make the nation that we have today. Peace out, kiddies.